My first announcement today is that you should all take off your jackets. I'm going to do the same. It's not that sexy, man.
So how's that for political theater? I've got to applaud how President Obama started his speech yesterday, taking off the jacket, wiping his brow over and over with a big white hanky. He really worked it.
In positions of responsibility, we'll need to be less concerned with the judgment of special interests and well-connected donors. But more broadly, we've got to move beyond partisan politics on this issue.
And many in the mainstream media made note that it was such a scorcher during Obama's speech on climate change at Georgetown. The fact is, it was a typical summer day in Washington. 33 Celsius, 55% humidity, following an unusually long, cool spring. Summer arrived just in time to make the latest dire warnings and to make his call to action at least plausible. Barack Obama is in the legacy stretch drive of his presidency to go down in history as the green president, the one who finally did something about man-made global warming, the man who stopped climate change and saved the planet Earth from disaster. Can we start by dispelling some myths from Obama's doomsday address? Point one of his speech on the pressing urgency of global temperature trends.
The 12 warmest years in recorded history have all come in the last 15 years. Last year, temperatures in some areas of the ocean reached record highs, and ice in the Arctic shrank to its smallest size on record, faster than most models had predicted it would. These are facts.
Fact is, you're a mediocre president and a terrible scientist. Here's the fact. The average world temperature at the end of 2012, same as it was at the beginning of 1997. Flat line for 15 years plus. Fact. High temperature records are not being set with unusual frequency. Fact. Snow cover, northern hemisphere, where the most plausible claims of warming have been made, is not diminishing. Next, the claim that farmers are either getting scorched by climate change or getting washed out.
Hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency services and disaster relief. In fact, those who are already feeling the effects of climate change don't have time to deny it. Farmers see crops wilted one year, washed away the next, and higher food prices get passed on to you, the American consumer.
Never mind that Obama's commitment to corn-based ethanol has been driving up food prices already. In the United States, the climate is getting neither wetter nor drier on average over the years, but that hasn't stopped the president from blaming man-made climate change on extreme weather events.
In a world that's warmer than it used to be, all weather events are affected by a warming planet. The fact that sea level in New York Harbor, are now a foot higher than a century ago, that didn't cause Hurricane Sandy, but it certainly contributed to the destruction that left large parts of our mightiest city dark and underwater.
Fact. Tornadoes and other violent storms are not becoming more frequent. To the contrary, they've actually become less frequent. However, that did not stop Obama from blaming Hurricane Sandy on climate change. It did not stop enviro-zealots from blaming recent Oklahoma twisters on climate change. It did not stop irresponsible environmentalists from blaming recent flooding in Alberta on climate change. Look, Obama's fear-mongering is based on this faith in unproven man-made climate change, ripped right out of Al Gore's gospel. And his action plan is all too familiar to Ontario's disastrous green energy initiative. Green schemes that can have a real negative impact on the average person right now. And so right now it's time for some Canadian common sense. Okay, Barack Obama is set to ramp up government intervention in the energy sector, which will have some major negative impacts. But let's start with some of the positives in this story. Obama has stopped short of imposing carbon taxes and pricing schemes on businesses. That's a good thing. He's actually praised a cheap fossil fuel, natural gas, openly approves of fracking, a method of drilling that has become a front line for environmental activists. Obama also had high praise for nuclear energy, back in the good books after the Japanese disaster. But that's where the common ground ends, because the priority should be in utilizing the cheapest and most abundant forms of energy possible to keep the economy moving, to create more jobs. Obama kind of, sort of supports the job-creating Keystone Pipeline extension that would allow the increase of Canadian oil sands production.
I know there's been, for example, a lot of controversy surrounding the proposal to build a pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, that would carry oil from Canadian tar sands down to refineries in the Gulf. And the State Department is going through the final stages of evaluating the proposal. That's how it's always been done. But I do want to be clear. Allowing the Keystone Pipeline to be built requires a finding that doing so would be in our nation's interest. And our national interest will be served only if this project does not significantly exacerbate the problem of carbon pollution. The net effects of the pipeline's impact on our climate will be absolutely critical to determining whether this project is allowed to go forward.
Does anyone know what that means? Does he know what that means? I don't know. Both environmentalists and supporters of the project claiming a victory here, but here's what is clear. President Obama wants to meet his UN obligations, and he's willing to bypass Congress, bypass democracy, and use the power of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to crack down on big coal, America's largest single source of cheap, abundant power. Even though carbon is an essential element for life on Earth, Obama compared it to mercury and arsenic, a toxic pollutant, all based on the unproven theory of man-made global warming. Once benign carbon, now classified as a toxic pollutant. Now, once you do that, you can justify just about any kind of ridiculous government intervention. So the plan would increase regulation and the cost of producing cheap coal-fired electricity. In other words, increasing the cost of American business as the painful economic recovery continues, creating a competitive disadvantage with China. And they, of course, don't care about carbon. All of this kicks American job seekers right in the knees. And so we turn to the alternatives. New taxpayer-funded subsidies for green energy alternatives. Ontario, you're listening? You know this sad sack tale. Green energy, which has its own environmental impact anyway, from all the chemicals and toxins that go into windmill production to the health effects of those living under the shadows of the turbines, birds getting chopped up by the turbines. Will someone please think about the birds? Not a Hitchcock movie, reality. So the impact of environmental policy, the people in the province of Ontario could give Obama some advice. Former Premier McGuinty's green energy initiative has been a complete, unmitigated disaster. His vision of a government-manufactured green energy economy, a total failure. Taxpayers swallowing the cost of canceled power plants, hundreds of millions of dollars. Boondoggles. Dramatically higher power prices, little job creation. In fact, research confirms that more real jobs get destroyed by every single artificially created green job. The new Premier of Ontario, Liberal Kathleen Wynne, has dramatically scaled back the boondoggle created by her predecessor, just like Germany and Spain and all the other former green energy meccas have finally come to their senses on green energy policy. Despite all that, Obama feels compelled to act. Last week in Germany, the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin He called climate change the global threat of our time. But the ordinary American is far more concerned about the job market and keeping food on the table. A Pew Research survey finds that only 4 out of 10 Americans consider climate change a threat to the country's future. But despite the sentiment, Obama, well, he wants to follow the unproven theory. And here's the kicker. Even if the U.S. were to adopt unrealistically harsh measures to restrict carbon output by impoverishing Americans, the impact on the Earth's climate, assuming the models are right, would be close to nothing. Or as they say in the Bronx, nothing. Because of China and the rest of the developing world, they keep producing more carbon. Global warming alarmism is the worst scientific fraud in world history and may well prove to be the most job destructive. That's Canadian common sense.